I'm a horror writer by profession, and although I typically dabble in fiction and the occasional true crime, the following story has been passed down to me by my grandmother from her childhood during the Great Depression. It's one of my favorite stories that she shared with me, but to her, this is one for the archives of the Twilight Zone, as it's one of the scariest things that she's ever experienced. Down in the hollers of Tennessee in 1938, my grandma was 8 years old and the eldest girl of the 7 kids. They didn't have much as far as possessions went, but the one thing that was beloved by all the family members was their large oak radio that was sitting in the room closest to the kitchen. After dinner, the kids were allowed 1 hour of radio time while my great-grandpa sat in his chair, and my great-grandmother was cleaning up the kitchen from supper. They enjoyed programs like Little Orphan Annie, Edgar Bergen, and Charlie McCarthy, and The Lone Ranger. But on this night, the show they thought they were going to listen to was interrupted by a special bulletin from an unknown source. The younger kids were getting restless until Paul told them to hush up. Grandma said that the look on Pa's face made her scared, and her hands started to tremble. She knew something was very wrong. As a lull of quietness crept over the house, the man's voice spoke in a tone that was very unsettling. Pa leaned forward as the news broke that Martians had landed in nearby cities and were attacking its citizens and buildings. Suddenly, Ma dropped her plate on the wooden floor that broke everyone's concentration as their dog barked loudly on the outside porch. Pa bolted from his chair, took the shotgun off the wall, and slammed through the screen door. The younger kids were starting to whimper and cry as my grandma held them tight. A loud firing of a shotgun blast pierced through the night as the dog's bark became even more erratic. Grandma recalled later that she wasn't sure why Pa had fired the gun, but they always thought that since the dog was so fixated on a certain part of the tree line back behind their house, that if Pa shot into the air, it would scare whatever could have been in the woods away. But no one truly knows but him, and he never liked to talk about it. Pa busted back in through the door with the worried expression on his face. He hadn't seen anything, but the fact was, it was only a matter of time. The Martians would be moving out of the city and making their way towards the countryside, where their farm was. For Pa, there was no time to lose. There were already rumors of impending war, and now that idea, had some unknown creatures were taking over the planet, was enough to make him want to take his wife and kids to some place until they could return home, and hopefully, the farm would still be intact. He told Ma to get the kids ready. They'd be out in the truck in 5 minutes. The younger kids didn't know what to do. They've never seen their daddy like this before, and they never wanted to again. As my grandma got their coats and shoes on, grabbed their blankets off their beds, and jumped into the back of the truck. All the while, she could hear her parents arguing back and forth about what to take and what not to take. Leave it all. We don't have much time. Get in the damn truck and do as you're told. From what I've been told about my great-grandpa, he never drank nor swore, but on that chilly October night, the man had cursed enough to make a good Christian blush, but he knew that his wife and kids' lives were in danger. Slamming the door of the truck, she could hear my great-grandmother muffle quiet sobs as she looked up towards the sky. They all did. As Pa drove like a bat out of hell down the dirt road and deeper into the back country. Nothing. Nobody saw a thing. No bright lights or noises from the sky. Only the sound of wildlife and the crackling of branches in the woods. Suddenly, the truck stopped and turned off. They were consumed by darkness, and the kids began to cry. My great-grandma got out of the truck to check on them, as Pa got out and walked towards the edge of the woods, gun in tow. He was just looking up at the sky and wiping his brow with his handkerchief. As he came back, he told the kids that they were going on a camping trip to keep them from getting scared. He was going to head back to the house and check on the radio for any further updates. She knew this was a bad idea. She was so afraid that she would never see her Pa again. As the kids piled out of the truck, they leaned up against nearby trees and laid their heads back as Pa drove back toward the farm. My great-grandma was walking around with the youngest just to get her to calm down. As she was doing this, she looked at one of my uncles and asked if they were going to die. He shook his head and said, "Of course not. We're your brothers. We're the men of the house while Paul's gone. Nothing's going to happen as long as we're here." This made her feel a lot better as he got up from his spot against the tree and walked over to their mom. Grandma remembers her mom brushing her brother's head and kissing it with a light thank you. She wasn't sure how much time had passed, but she was getting sleepy and closed her eyes. Before she knew it, everyone saw headlights coming down the road and towards the edge of the woods. Everyone was startled and she wanted to cry, but her voice was caught in her throat. "Martians, they're coming for us." Thankfully, it wasn't. It was just Pa returning back to them with a relieved look on his face. She knew her mother had to be expecting the worst, but her Pa just hugged her. She told her it was all over and they could come back home now. As she rounded up the kids, she told them that everything was okay and it was safe to come home. It wasn't until the next day that they found out through the radio that the Martian invasion was actually a radio show just in time for Halloween, and it was the telling of a book, War of the Worlds. Mr. Orson Welles had fooled them all and scared an entire nation into thinking that the world was being taken over by creatures from another world. My grandma said that she could laugh at it now, and that her pa often considered getting rid of the radio because it made him out to be a fool in front of his family. She was just thankful that it was just a story. She'd always wondered if there really was creatures from another planet that could wipe out the entire human race and alter the world as we know it. Even as she got older, Grandma couldn't watch any movies or shows that had anything to do with aliens. One of my uncles actually brought her a copy of the book War of the Worlds as a joke for her birthday. Obviously, she didn't think it was funny at the time. When she passed, I inherited the book. It still sits in my library to this day. Needless to say, her story inspired me to become a writer and shares a piece of my family's history that made me into the horror enthusiast I am today. I apologize if there's any errors or things that might not make sense. The perspective of the story being told is from me and a part also from my friend. This happened to me the weekend of Halloween, and I personally don't really like talking about it, but I've been told by my friend to share it and get it off my chest. Me and a friend were invited to a house party just for college students in the richer area of town. So the house was huge and had a lot of land and pool area. The party was themed to be a little naughty, so my friends dressed in a sexy nurse outfit. I dressed as a belly dancer. Majority of the party took place in the house, as there was maybe like 70 people, with the house being very spacious, so not too difficult to get around. I myself, I'm not really much of a drinker, but I did have some juice that was available. At some point, me and my friends got pulled over to take some pictures, and I set my drink down. After what felt like an hour of just taking pictures, I finally found my cup and took another sip, not even worrying that I'd left my cup alone for quite a while. Then a man came up to me who looked to be in his late 20s, early 30s. He said my boyfriend's name and said he's been trying to call me. That's when I realized I didn't have my phone on me. I have loads of respect for my boyfriend. We always make sure to stay in contact with one another. And since he had to work, I promised I would contact him. I had just forgotten. The man said it's urgent and said I can use his phone to call in one of the other rooms. So not even thinking at all, I just followed this guy. If my boyfriend really wanted to call me, then I knew it would be something terrible. As we entered the room, I felt as if I just ran a mile and felt completely winded. The man closed the door behind me and sat on the bed and then gave me his phone. I began to feel more and more weak, like I just got a migraine and I just couldn't make the call. Then he helped me lay down, and within a few seconds, I was out cold. I woke up later not sure where I was or what even happened. I found my friend rubbing a napkin on my tummy while yelling. It took me a bit to come back to reality. I realized I was in a bedroom with my friend cleaning some stuff off of me. That's when I had a panic attack. Just realized that I quite possibly have been used. My friend calmed me down and told me that it didn't happen. She explained that she couldn't find me anywhere and assumed I went to the bathroom. But after a few minutes, I still didn't show, so she went looking for me. Eventually, she started checking the bedrooms, and that's when she found me laying on the bed with that random guy. He was sucking something out of my belly button. Apparently, he was playing shots with my unconscious body and sucking alcohol out of my belly button, licking salt from my chest and kissing my lips. She didn't know how long this went on for. I immediately felt sick and even coughed up from just the thought of it. Thankfully, my boyfriend ended up getting off of work early after my friend told him what happened. He picked me up while my friend asked about the guy, but of course, no one knew him or recognized him. I was taken to the urgent care to get looked at. Thankfully, nothing was wrong with me, and the drug in my drink didn't cause any further harm than just knocking me out. I wish the story actually ended here, but I started to receive texts from a random guy. At first, he was just asking me random things and I didn't respond. But then he showed me a pic of my torso and started saying super creepy things to me and even giving me the impression that he's stalking me. This is still ongoing to this day. He'll randomly text me. I've had the idea to try to bait him one of these days and have backup to catch him, but I don't know how smart he is or what he's potentially capable of. This incident happened to me last year on Halloween. My little brother and I were home alone, since our parents had gone out to a Halloween party. They tasked us with handing out candy to the trick-or-treaters. This really bummed my brother and I out because we had made plans to go trick-or-treating with a few friends, but whatever. Our parents told us we were too old to still be trick-or-treating, and that we could instead invite our friends over to the house and just hang out here. Well, my friends declined our invitation to come over because they were still wanting to go trick-or-treating. So eventually and utterly, leaving me home alone with my brother to hand out candy. A lot of people did stop by the house, and by 10 p.m., almost all the candy was gone. My brother and I decided we'd just eat the rest. So we're sitting on the couch, watching a scary movie, stuffing ourselves with candy, and there was a knock at the door. I stormed off the couch, wondering who the hell could be knocking on our door this late at night. I assumed that it was just some late night trick-or-treaters, but even if that was the case, I had turned the porch light off and the Halloween decorations off as well, which is a dead giveaway that we're out of candy or we're not home. So in the moment, we just kind of assumed it was our parents. Being cautious, I looked through the peephole and saw this suspicious man just standing on our front porch. He was wearing a black hoodie with the hood over his head, which made it difficult to see his face. The only detail of his face that I could spot was that he had a beard and dry, crusty lips. There's no way that this guy was a trick-or-treater because he wasn't wearing a costume. He was far too old to be trick-or-treating alone. His hands were stuffed in the front pocket of his hoodie. He also looked really thin. Every single red flag went off in my head about this guy. There's no way in hell I'm opening up the door. Still looking through the peephole, I watch as he knocks on the door again. He seemed desperate for us to open up. He was even shaking. It wasn't cold outside, and definitely not cold enough for someone to be trembling the way he was. He was definitely giving me a bad vibe. I wanted to just get rid of him as soon as possible. "We're out of candy," I shouted to him. I watched as a smile spread across his face, and it wasn't a friendly smile either. "Are you in there alone?" the man asked, almost in a mocking voice. His voice was raspy and dry. "Should I call the police?" my little brother asked me quietly, gripping his cell phone. The man let out a low grumble and said, Sounds like you're not alone in there." I continued to watch him through the peephole. His hands were still wedged tightly in his pocket, and he was still shaking a bit. I was now wondering if he was armed. I decided to take action and spoke to him in the most intimidating voice I could muster. "Get the fuck away from my house, or I will call the police," I shouted at him. His smile faded, and he bared his teeth. His teeth were piss yellow, and I concluded that he was probably some homeless crackhead. He had a look of fury plastered all over his face, but fortunately, he left without trying to break in. Probably and hopefully because he knew I wasn't messing around with him. I didn't stop watching him through the peephole as I saw him completely off of our property. My brother and I breathed a sigh of relief and just decided not to call the police. We were a bit paranoid after this, however. Watched TV until our parents came home. We didn't tell them about that man, since he hadn't really tried to harm us. But now when I think back on this, I wish we would have called the police because we would have been able to prevent a murder. You see, the next day, we found out that the elderly woman who lived a few houses down from us had been brutally murdered. Her neighbor had found her laying on her front porch, covered in blood. She'd been stabbed multiple times in the chest and neck. My brother and I immediately knew who'd done it, and we told the police what we knew. They couldn't really do much from the information that we'd given them since we hadn't seen many details of that guy's actual face. They went on a hunt for the man, but never caught him, and I continued to blame myself for that poor old lady's murder. I could have prevented it from happening by just calling the police. I think the most disturbing thing of it all is the fact they didn't take anything from the old lady's house. Her house had been left untouched, but he could have gone in and taken what he wanted since her door was wide open. That means he was literally just out to kill. That was his only intention. He didn't want money or jewelry. He only had the urge to murder. My husband Jim and I own an antique business in an old, bizarre barn of a building. It has 5 floors, multiple other tenants, including a restaurant. Halloween was a Monday last year. We lock up the business at 5 p.m. and went to an early dinner across town. Not long after this, we get a call from our security monitor company around 6:30. Motion detection on the lower level, then another. We left in a tearing hurry, but figured it's a bird or a rat. We don't have rats, but it has to be something. Maybe even a cat. It's way too early for a break-in after all. I went inside to the main level, upstairs, and disarmed the alarm, and started fumbling noisily with the keys and the big iron gate. One of the many things that separate the floors at night. Jim checked the perimeter outside for signs of a break-in. Nothing. Doors and windows still intact. Definitely, absolutely had to be a bird, a rat, or a cat. Dusk was long gone. The shadows had settled in and started to take over. Now wardrobes loomed in the dark. Wardrobes and nothing more, right? I headed down below to the location of the alarm, trusting Jim would follow. After all, it was a rat, a cat, or a bird. I'm accustomed to the building after dark, so I just turned my light on my phone on, not the overhead ones, and walked around boldly like I owned the place. I looked in the corner with the motion detector. Nothing. It's just a red eye blinking mindlessly right back at me. No rats, no cats, no birds. I turned and went the other way, while Jim poked around a few aisles over. And there it was. A burglary kit just sitting in the middle of the floor. Bolt cutters, a fire extinguisher, just sitting there, waiting. I have never gotten a bigger case of sheer terror so fast. After all, there was no broken window or door, so he was still there, in the dark, with me. I hissed, Jim, 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 please, please, please. He didn't hear me. I literally couldn't scream. Just like in those stupid dreams, my voice was stuck. It was just me, the spotlight, burglary tools, and a hostile presence lurking in the dusty shadows while I whispered for someone to come save me. Finally, 1,000 years, or maybe 10 seconds later, Jim wondered why I'd taken root in the hallway and came to see. He saw what I was frozen pointing at and was like, oh fuck. We bolted out the front door to call 911 and wait, and we abandoned the building to the burglar. An eternal 5 minutes later, the police showed up and were initially pretty unimpressed with our find, the crowbar and fire extinguisher, until we pulled up the security footage that revealed the actual horror, the face of my new sleep paralysis demon. So this guy, as is obvious, he's built like a lean, mean brick shithouse. He'd crouched on a landing behind a bookcase when we closed and watched me and my staff lock up. Bided his time, then calm as could be, he walked out and went to the men's restroom in the hallway downstairs. That area isn't set for motion detections for a variety of reasons. He spent a while in there moving around with the door open. He instructed the mask using one of ours, and a fake flower wreath to hold it on. He looked right into the camera, barefaced, and then put the mask on. Stared at it in his mask for a time, and then finally pulled the gloves on. He stacked a few solid body vintage suitcases in front of the tall iron gate and hopped right over it, like it was nothing. He ran down the hall, triggering the 6:30 silent alarm, and looped the floor. He ran back into the hall, moved a ladder to hop back onto the other side of the gate, and bizarrely just repeated this a few times. Then he went to the basement, wormed over a 15-inch gap over yet another iron gate, and back to the hall again, and then stared at the camera some more. He was moving fast up and over, back and forth, upstairs and downstairs, parkour style almost. Then he got the tools out, peeled apart one of our steel lock boxes with a crowbar, and stole a handful of our keys to access showcases. At this point, he heard me fumbling with the gate and keys upstairs. He ditched the stolen keys and tools and hid, watching me while he waited in the dark. When we exited to call 911, he ran back to the basement. In the basement, there is access to a dirt tunnel that circles the perimeter of the building. He broke the door open and entered. Spiders the size of dinner plates live in there. He had no lights. It's muddy and dank. It's, in a word, petrifying. There is a very tiny exit hatch if you walk the whole thing and take the multiple turns that dumps you into the busy kitchen of a restaurant, whereupon one would need to stroll past lines of cooks out into the restaurant proper, with cameras too, and then could leave through their front door, plastered with mud, which does leave tracks, speaking from experience. When we found it, there was this clear entrance into the tunnel, but no exit tracks. No muddy footprints, nobody walking out on the restaurant cameras, and the cooks noticed nothing. Reviewing the footage, timing it all, tracing his path from camera to camera, and searching the building carefully took hours. By the end, all of us, including the police, were starting to lose our collective cool and freak out. There was no chill, when even the guys with guns were rattled. After all, where the f did he go? Jim and the two officers still had no choice but to walk the dirt tunnel. The cops took one look and were like, absolutely not. Jim insisted, so they made him walk point. They made it about halfway through the tunnel before the cops were like, oh, no. You're leaving with us, and we're going to review more footage from the restaurant where there are no spiders and all of this. Jim got the okay from them to board up both ends of the tunnel, which he did solidly. And thus the story ends. The pictures got spread widely, but we got no useful leads despite the decent face shot. Did he indeed crawl out of a hatch in the busy kitchen and just stroll out past the cooks, leaving no trace of mud? Maybe. We got no suspicious smells coming out of the tunnel in later weeks and months, but nobody has walked the far side since. We only onboarded the tunnel last week for the split water main shenanigans. I have vowed I will use his skull in this year's Halloween display, if he is indeed dead down there. Sophomore year of college. The memories. October hits. It's time to get my spooky on and have some fun at parties and dress up. Halloween is absolutely my favorite holiday. About a week before Halloween, one night I just said screw it. I was bored. My Tinder date canceled due to studying for an exam. I was in a pissy mood and I really didn't want to go hang out with friends in their dorms or just get drunk. So I decided to play a little basketball at this park that no one goes to. Basketball really tends to relax me. I just shoot around for about an hour and I knew it would relax me. Then I figured I'd go back to my place and just play some video games. I pull up to this park. As anticipated, not a single car in sight. There's a trail nearby that leads to a mountain. It was a great time to shoot around and just relax. I'm even contemplating putting headphones in, but then I realize as night's approaching, it's best I hear what's going on around me. Sunset hits, and it's a beautiful pink sky from above. Picture perfect. Another 15 minutes pass by, and it's now completely dark. I'll definitely be wrapping up this shoot around very soon. Until I heard a loud piercing scream. Thought it was probably coming from the trail. Then it proceeded with some weird laughs. So I'm like, okay, but spooked. I still don't see a damn thing. So I tell myself 10 more minutes and I'm out of here. Then I notice a car pulls up in the parking lot. The car proceeds to park. I go to the bathroom near the court and I'm telling myself, okay, I'm taking a piss and then I'm leaving. As I'm taking a piss, and I'm not lying or exaggerating here, I hear a whisper from the bathroom stall next to me. I swallow. Shit. It could be a tweaker, a homeless person, or just a troubled individual. As I'm coming out of the bathroom, a car door slams. I'm trying to get my eyes on whoever just got out of the car. I creep behind the small building where the bathrooms are and peek out. I completely gasped and was just in shock. 2 clowns are now walking slowly to the courts and then to the trail nearby. I'm literally thinking maybe I should just follow these 2 clowns, see where they're going so late at night. Then I also tell myself that probably won't be the best idea. I put my backpack on and get ready to walk to my car. I sprint over to my car and hop in, get on my phone and make a phone call, telling my buddies I'll be online in about an hour. I notice someone's now sitting on the bench near the basketball court. I'm thinking it had to be the guy in the bathroom, but whatever, I've had enough. I drive off and get back to my place. And that's really the end of the story. I know it's not exactly what you were expecting and it wasn't as scary as some people might think, but if you remember, this was during that time in 2016 when clown sightings were everywhere, all around the world. It was just a creepy encounter I wanted to share. I'm not sure if anything would have happened had I stuck around. And who knows? Maybe these clown sightings might resurface again. The story might not be as scary as some of the others here, but at the time, I personally was scared shitless. The events happened in October of 2003. I was 10 years old and in the 6th grade. Where I come from, the middle schools got out after the elementary school and the high school. My friends and I knew that we would have to immediately start trick-or-treating if we wanted to get any candy. Halloween of 2003 was on a Friday. This excited us. We could hit every house we wanted and didn't have to worry about school the next day. After school, our parents picked us up and drove us to our friend Alex's house. He lived on a road named South Herald. To the left of South Herald was an identical street named South Concord. At the end of one side of South Herald was a turn that brought you to South Concord, and on the other side was a main road. Alec lived closer to the main road, so our plan was to start at his house, go to the main road, then turn up and go down Concord. After that, we'd go back down to Herald and then return to Alec's house. So let's begin. We're trick-or-treating. There was probably 12 of us in total, but the notable ones were myself, Alec, Nate, and James. We'd been accruing a great deal of candy when we get to this one house. It wasn't unlike any of the other houses, 2 stories, a garage, front lawn, etc. However, there was a Michael Myers statue, or so we thought, in the front lawn. We went up to the house, got candy, and then examined the statue. He was holding a knife and was hunched over. So James, deciding it was a good idea to kick it in the shin. Suddenly, the statue jumped and began holding its shin. We were definitely frightened, and now knowing that this statue was actually a dude. "I'm gonna fucking kill you," said the man. Now obviously, plenty of people claim they want to kill someone and not really mean it. We just assumed that it was an idle threat and continued on our way. At around 8:30, it's now pretty dark out. I lived up north at the time, and anyone who lives up there can agree that it gets dark very quickly. So anyway, we're still collecting candy when Nate and I began discussing the science behind slasher films, like who gets off first and whatnot. One of the people we were with dropped his bag, so we all stopped and waited. Now, the person had to turn around in order to pick up his bag, and when he lifted his head, he began to squint, as if he was trying really hard to see something. We all turned to see the man in the Michael Myers costume, now following us. It was kind of odd, no one else was with him. Hell, we were the only group on the road. He was still holding onto that knife, and when he noticed we were looking at him, he quickened his pace. Being just stupid preteens, we all book it. Looking over my shoulder, I now realize that he's running too. Fortunately for my slow ass, he was a decent link behind us. Our luck even turned more over in our favor when a minivan stopped at the end of Concord. It was one of the people I was with's mother. We all quickly pile in and told her someone was chasing us, and she immediately drove us all back to Alec's house. What makes this even worse is that Alec and Nate told me that the man was still roaming the streets after we had all left. I don't really think I felt so terrified. I honestly have never left the house on Halloween since. Now, whether or not the knife the guy had was real or not is irrelevant. It's just one of those things that I have no intention of knowing, just in case that situation was real and all. I'm just thankful that that's all that happened that night. Happy Halloween, everyone. This happened about 13 years ago when I was a sophomore in college, attending a liberal arts school in Suffolk County, New York. Within the first month or two of freshman year, I found myself in a very tight-knit group of fellow theater geeks. 6 guys, myself included, and 1 girl. And they all love horror movies and ghost stories. I had found my crew. Freshman year was tough, but we all held each other up and made the whole experience much more enjoyable for one another. At the beginning of sophomore year, we decided that in October, as the Halloween season was ramping up, we would find a creepy wooded spot in a nearby town just some night and scare the crap out of ourselves. We did some research and found that there was a particularly isolated area about 30 minutes away, infamous for paranormal sightings. Perfect. The 7 of us split into 2 different cars and headed out into the night. So allow me to set the scene. You turn off a busy main road, flooded with strip malls and restaurants and whatnot, and you were almost immediately greeted by complete darkness. Again, this area was very heavily wooded. It was essentially a large web of winding roads surrounded by trees. Very few streetlights, and even fewer houses. Without a GPS or good sense of direction, one could easily get lost inside there. We all made sure to have fully charged phones and flashlights, just in case. But the goal was to keep driving until we collectively decided to pull over and just go exploring. So per the directions, we made a left off the main road, drove for 30 minutes or so into this dark network, picking directions at random, getting intentionally lost. After our cars made a turn, and to our surprise, there was a huge log just in front of us. We'd reached a dead end of some kind, with nothing but trees beyond it. We all get out to see exactly what this was. We stepped over the log and noticed two narrow trails leading in some different directions. This seemed like as good a time as any to grab our flashlights and do some amateur ghost hunting. We flipped a coin and set off to the trail on the right. The trail was so narrow that we had to walk single file to avoid getting whacked by branches. For whatever reason, I ended up in the back. I'm usually pretty rational and level-headed, but I have to say, the further that we went in, the more I was overcome with an uneasy feeling. I kept hearing sounds deep in those woods, unable to shake the feeling that we were being watched. But I seemed to be the only one who heard these things, so I shrugged it off as just my own imagination. And in any case, the whole point of us being there was to get scared. Not to mention the fact that we were 7 able-bodied college students. What would we come across that could take us down? We headed down this trail for another 20 minutes, and just when I thought it would never end, we came into a massive clearing, and I mean massive. It was a large open field of unkempt grass, comparable in scope to a golf course, but not nearly as well manicured. Trees surrounded the entire field, which was so large, we couldn't even see the end of it where we were standing. I was thrilled to get out of that narrow trail, but I don't think any of us were expecting to find an area that vast. One of us looked to the right and said, "Hey, check that out." We all turned, and there was this old, dilapidated house several hundred yards away. The house itself was completely dark. No cars or sign of anyone living there. We walked over and shined our flashlights at it, and sure enough, the windows and doors were all boarded up. I managed to peer in between the boards on one of the windows, and all I could see was an old white couch covered in plastic, but an otherwise empty room. Whoever used to live there, they were long gone. Because there was no way in, and because we all felt sufficiently creeped out by the house, we decided to walk closer to the trail that we'd come in on and have a seat in the field and figure out where to go next. We walked towards that narrow trail, but before we could sit down, my friend Mark stopped what he was doing. His expression dropped and he pointed. As we all turned, on the very far side of the field, directly across from where we come in, we could see someone, tall, lanky, and pale, dancing among the trees. And by dancing, I mean it was skipping around, grabbing a tree and swinging from it, then doing the same to another tree. Basically a do-si-do. The moon was so bright and the woods so dark, it actually took a second for all of us to really understand what we were looking at. Jay, the 6'4" skeptic of the group, wasn't seeing it. I leaned into him, pointed in that direction, and said, "Jay, look where I'm pointing. Do you not see that?" He squinted a bit, and the second that he saw it, he gasped with everything he had, clenched my arm, and whispered, "The fuck is that?" What happened next sent shockwaves through all of us. Whoever this was, they stopped dancing, looked in our direction, and started charging straight at us. Without even thinking, we all freaked and ran back to the trail. Yet again, Jay was the only one who didn't see what was happening. He shouted after us, "Guys, what is it? Where are you going?" After about 15 seconds of running like hell, I heard Jay scream, "Holy shit," and I looked back and saw his flashlight following the rest of us onto the trail. While the walk into the woods took about 20 minutes, we made it back to our 2 cars, hopped in, and were peeling away in closer to 5. Once we were at a safe distance, we pulled over, got out, and checked in with one another about what had just happened. My heart was still pounding, and I know everyone else was feeling the same way. Nearly 15 years later, we're all still friends, living in different states, yet keeping in touch through marriages, divorces, children, etc. But occasionally, out of the blue, one of us will send a group text to the others with something to the effect of, "The woods. That really happened, right?" It most certainly did. The experience is always in the back of my mind, and I'm pretty sure it always will be. Here's the thing that still resonates with me about that night. Whoever that was, they were dancing maniacally in the woods at 1 in the morning, then ran directly for a group of young adults, not at all fazed by the fact that they were severely outnumbered. Did he know we were there from the second we parked? Was he that sound that I kept hearing when we walked that trail? Whatever the case may be, when he came for us that night, you can be sure none of us wanted to stick around and see what he was truly capable of. It's spooky season, which always gets me talking with buddies about the creepy things that we've been through. I almost never tell this story though, because it's not one of those classic scary stories everyone likes to share around a few beers. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. Night shift was a very small crew, 5 security. 5 is running admin and packing. As admin staff, I sat with security as they'd switch between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually pretty silent and pretty boring. Now, I'm not sure how the building itself got its haunted story. No one besides us ever wanted to work at night because of all the rumors. But none of us had any experiences. No one died there. No crazy accidents ever happened. It wasn't destroyed and rebuilt. It was peaceful and uneventful. But these stories always spread, as they tend to do with big, dark, creepy spaces. And it was creepy. It's surrounded by woods, circled with fencing, mostly empty at night, which made me feel incredibly imposing and empty. Creepy motion-activated lights inside and out. Sounds carried and echoed. But still, not one of us ever had any experiences out there until this. It was around Halloween, maybe a week or 2 before. I was halfway into my shift, making it my lunch hour. It was chilly. I went to my car to grab a bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door, which the fencing runs closest to. It's maybe 10 yards off the back door. The only light is motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone. The light cut out. I sat a bit in the dark, just sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up and waved to activate the light and to find the ashtray. But as the light flickered on, I heard a noise at the fence across from me. Now, we do occasionally get animals out there, and they could get startled. It was all explained in my head instantly, but as soon as I stood up, I heard the fence keep slightly jingling. When I looked up, I didn't really see much. The light really didn't illuminate much outside of its circle on the ground. I don't know why, but my first thought was just to say hello. When I did, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness, trying to adjust. Then the light went out again. There in the darkness, the moon had a little more effect lighting up the area. The fence started lightly jingling again, really lightly. As my eyes better adjusted, I now saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence, fidgeting with the links. So my first thought, this has to be a kid just trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and ghost hunt. Some high school kids have been here before without knowing the building never closed. And we were usually pretty cool with them poking around, as long as they didn't touch anything and made it fast. So they could tell their friends they lived through it. But it really wasn't that common. And this was one person, alone. It all just felt off. I radioed in with my walkie to desk security. Hey, we have a visitor out by the north door, behind the fence. I've seen the monitors of camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered. They'd be able to see the fence clearly. My walkie beat back and the voice said, we aren't reading any movement at the fence. Are you sure it's not in the tree line? Negative. They're fiddling with the fence right in front of me. This is all happening in the span of seconds. My cigarette butt was still in my hands and I just barely swallowed the last sip of my coffee. They didn't even have a chance to reply to me. When, from the fence, I hear a massively louder thrash of all the links, and I saw this figure full on sprinting at me. I made a terribly embarrassing choking noise, crushed my coffee cup against the knob trying to rush myself inside. The fence is so close it's not going to take more than a few bounds to reach me. I pushed myself in so hard and held the knob in place trying to figure the deadbolt into place as well. The knob was flicked down and hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. I quickly radioed, "Get down here now!" But I already heard steps coming my way. The knob stopped moving by the time they got there. It was all over with. Back at the office, the security staff tried to play off like I was having a laugh about it, like this was a great Halloween joke that I played. I didn't understand why they weren't taking it seriously until I saw the playback. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. My brain couldn't explain what I experienced outside while confronting the video. I immediately thought this was a big goof on me. Maybe they fiddled with the footage and just had someone scare me. But they genuinely thought I was the one that was goofing with them. While we were doing that whole back and forth on, okay, whose idea was this? Who was messing with who? The second time we watched the playthrough, we noticed the way the door handle kept moving, even when I removed my hand from it, both from the inside camera and the outside. I noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside, the fence made a slight jolt, as if it were pushed. There were no holes in the fence, or any kind of cuts made where someone could squeeze through. There was no creepy shadows or unexplained whiffs of smoke or lights or any movement besides those ones. Just me in the night jumping out of my skin and running back inside. I kept trying to think back to when I jumped, when that figure burst at me in full speed, if the light activated for their movement or mine. I couldn't decide. I couldn't remember. It all happened just too fast. But nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. It was just tricks of the moonlight, overactive imagination, and too much coffee. Branches against chain links. No one's ever experienced anything weird here, and it wouldn't just start up randomly for no reason. I didn't want to make a fuss, and I no longer wanted to argue about it. They already thought I was just being weird. Maybe I was. I went about finishing my shift that night, but no one used the back door again, and it remained locked. The longest of the employed security was finishing up the shift at the desk with me in the office. It was before dawn. The morning shift was trickling in the parking lot. He watched the cameras in silence while I typed away. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, I've never really liked the North End. Feels like someone's eyes are always on me. That was honestly the most he's ever said to me in the year plus that I worked there. The most I'd ever heard him say. I felt like that statement held even more weight for that alone. I didn't quit though. I stayed on for another 7 months until the company was bought out, and they stopped overnight shifts to pile on more work during the day shifts for less money with less employees. To my knowledge, there was never another incident. I never actually went out there again though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers. But I made excuses not to sit outside, to be honest. I feel like a few of us did. I've never before or since had moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me. And I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I keep thinking back at the door handle, jerking down and up when I was steps back on the walkie. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. No one ever even brought it up again. And whenever anyone asked about working in the old crappy factory, everyone would say, "Oh, we never saw anything up there. It's just a boring building at night." I would smile and keep my side of the story to myself. But I wondered if anyone else was holding stories to themselves. Maybe they slip out after a few beers and fueled a few more questions about that one haunted factory. Hey everyone, thanks for listening if you stuck around to this point. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button, the subscribe button, and that notification bell to be notified when future episodes come out. If you have a true scary story of your own, feel free to send it to my email or post it to my subreddit. You can stalk me on Twitter, you can stalk me on Facebook, and you can also stalk me on Instagram. All of these links are below. What is going on, guys? Hope you're having a fantastic spooky season so far, the first week of October. Like I stated in my community chat, that I will have and be doing at least bare minimum 2, maybe 3 episodes per week. 3 is the goal right now. 3 is definitely happening this week. We'll see what happens next week, but yeah. Sunday, I started getting like chills and body aches and going from like hot to cold, and yeah, I'm just now getting back, and I'm not even completely back at 100% now, but that shit kicked my fucking ass. I don't know, my son had it last week, so I'm assuming whatever he had, he passed it on to me. It was just like half of a week later, whatever. I don't know. It sucked, but hopefully that's my one. I usually get sick like once a year, and that's it. And hopefully that was my one time, and now we can be done with it. I'm glad it happened then and not like right in the middle of October, but whatever, here we are. Please don't happen again. Thank you. Fingers crossed. But yeah, again, that is the plan. 3 episodes per week. Friday will be fall stories, like fall volume 2 stories. And then Sunday will more than likely be the diving deep ocean horror stories and all that as well. And then next week, my initial plan is Tuesday, Thursday, Sunday drops for all of the episodes. And there will be a giant Halloween collab. Probably, if not on Halloween, a day before, something like that. I haven't figured out exactly when, but that'll have a bunch of narrators come on here and tell scary stories. So I've been doing that every year for the last 2 years, I think. So gonna try to keep that tradition alive. But yeah, I don't really ever say this, but if you got a scary story or a true scary story, please send them to me. I have a awful job. Like it is a pain in the ass trying to find stories. So if you're listening and you have stories of your own that you want to hear me narrate, please send them to me. I desperately need stories. So yeah, if you have any, please consider sending them to me and having them narrated here. I would absolutely be greatly appreciative of that. Outside of that, man, I think that should be it. I got stuff on the smoker right now. I need to go check for dinner, and apologize if you hear my kids screaming in the background, because yeah, but that's just what it is being a dad. Can't help it. Sometimes I don't have the I don't know what word I'm trying to search for here. sometimes the house just ain't quiet when I'm recording, and getting 3 episodes out a week is going to mean that I'm recording at hours of the day and or at night when my kids are buck wild, and you might hear a little scream here or there. Anyways, no more rambling. Happy that spooky season's here, so let's enjoy it together, and I'm going to get as much as possible, get as much content as possible out there for y'all, because I appreciate you, I love you, and I will see you on Friday for the next episode. Cheers.